Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the fourth session of Cherry Bekaert's 2022 Professional Services Virtual Conference Series. My name is Scott Duda, and I'm a partner and leader of Cherry Bekaert's Professional Services Industry Group. Our virtual conference series is designed to provide quality, industry-specific CPE at convenient times, all free of charge. We're offering general sessions for all professional service firms, as well as sessions specific to A&E firms, law firms, and financial services firms. We hope you'll be able to join us over the next few weeks for our continuing virtual series. Please visit the link in the chat to register for all remaining sessions. And a couple of items to note before we get started. I know as we get into December, everyone is looking at CPE credit. And so to receive CPE credit, you must answer at least 3 polling questions of the 4 and attend for the full 50-minute session. CPE certificates will be issued via email within 10 days. If you don't receive yours within those 10 days, please email cbhlearning@cbh.com. A recorded version of this webinar will be available in about 1 week and will be sent via email and posted to our website as well. If you have any questions during the webinar, there's a Q&A window located in your control panel. Please use that, post the question to the chat, and then we'll respond. Just a note, there's a short survey also at the end of the webinar. We value your feedback and ask that you please take part. Now, with the housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to introduce Bob Mish, partner in our digital advisory group at Cherry Bekaert. Bob?
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our distinguished panelists for today. Toby Brown is the Chief Practice Management Officer at Perkins Coie. He has 40 years of experience trying to get lawyers to embrace business principles. You can see his areas of expertise are law firm strategy, pricing, lateral partner acquisition, and client innovation. We're also pleased to be joined by Joy Heath Rush, who's the Executive Director of the International Legal Technology Association, or ILTA. Joy has over 40 years of experience working with lawyers and technology. Her areas of expertise include leadership, strategic planning, application requirements, evaluation and selection, and the user experience. And finally, we have Nita Sanger, Director in Cherry Bekaert's Digital Advisory practice, with over 25 years of experience in business strategy and transformational consulting, specifically around professional services areas. Her areas include business strategy and growth, digital transformation, pre and post acquisition integration, including carve-outs, change management, and business process optimization. Our agenda for today. We'll talk a little bit about the current state of the legal industry and the shifts occurring and the changing role of the general counsel, the changing role of the corporate legal departments. We'll talk about some thoughts around digitally transforming the business and the practice of law. We'll discuss what the law firm of the future might look like. We'll talk about tools and tips for achieving that desired future state. And then we get into our panel discussion, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to. So by the end of this session, you'll be able to understand the changing landscape of the legal profession, methods to digitally transform the practice of law, talk about tools and tips to achieve a desired state, and what our experts view as the law firm of the future. So first, we'll start with a polling question. What role do you serve in the legal community? Practicing attorney, general counsel, legal operations, legal tech, or interested bystander? It's good to get an understanding of what perspective our audience is coming from. We'll give it a few more minutes. Maddie, if we're getting up to our 80%. Oh, the majority are interested bystanders. We've got a few practicing attorneys, legal operations, legal tech, and 67% of our audience is interested bystanders. Thank you. That wasn't too painful. So let's talk about the current state of the legal industry and some of the recent shifts we've seen. The needs of the buyers of legal services are changing. They're becoming more complex and nuanced, and legal advice is different today than it was just a few years ago. And the role of the general counsel is changing. It's no longer a support role. It's now viewed as a strategic advisor role to the C-suite. And corporate legal departments have needed to become more tech savvy and be able to augment the expertise of the rest of the firm. And then we've all heard about the competition for junior talent, especially junior legal talent. This talent pool requires or desires more flexibility, more meaningful and value-added work, and the result, higher turnover and higher salaries. So just some of the shifts we've seen in recent years, which leads us to our next polling question. And these are coming rapid fire because we want to get to the panel discussion. So what do you view as the biggest shift in the legal industry that we just discussed? Increasing the application of technology, the competition for talent, the changing needs of the buyers, or the hybrid workforce? There are other changes. We focused on these, and I'm sure our panelists will talk about others that they've seen. A few more seconds to respond. Maddie, do we have those up there? Okay, we do. So increasing application of technology, I'm surprised that wasn't higher. That's 8%. Competition for talent is 29%. Changing needs of the buyer is 27%, and the hybrid workforce. That'll be interesting. Okay, so given these changes in the legal industry, I want to talk a little bit about digitally transforming the business and the practice of law. And when we talk about making this digital transformation, we talk about areas of focus and areas of change. So the areas of focus will impact specific areas that will change. So let's start with growth strategy. And growth strategy could be organic or inorganic. If organic growth strategy, the focus should be on developing key performance indicators or KPIs to measure performance. If it's inorganic, we're talking about acquiring other law firms, but there's also the opportunity for growth to engage in strategic alliances. From a products and services perspective, we're talking about digitally transforming to make certain products repeatable, that go beyond normal legal advice, including productized offerings. And these productized offerings could include industry benchmarking services or managed legal services. From a go-to-market perspective, it needs to go beyond relationships. It includes actively using CRM systems and digital marketing. It includes developing a capability around business development and leveraging sales professionals. And it also includes the use of digital platforms for service delivery. And then business operations. We're always looking to streamline business operations, outsourcing or automating non-revenue generating activities, leveraging alternate business models and talent models, and then leveraging an ecosystem of legal technology, business, and service providers. And these areas of focus and making these digital transformation efforts impacts the organization in the areas of people, process, technology, and we add culture to bring it all together. people, process, technology is one we've heard frequently, but the thought process and the concept of culture brings it all together. So when we talk about people, we mentioned earlier the competition for junior talent, but it's also the opportunity to leverage external subject matter experts and take advantage of staffing firms. These could, other alternatives could include offshoring, onshoring, or full-time or part-time employment. Again, on the process side, it's directly related to the business operations and streamlining and optimize the processes. And it could include using, instead of providing managed services, using managed legal services, as well as that ecosystem of technology and service providers. And then the technology changes. Technology is the enabler of change. It should provide for a seamless experience for your clients as well as professionals. And it should safeguard security and privacy. In addition, providing leadership with analytics to make better and more informed business decisions. And lastly, culture. This is around change. Change is hard. And it's very important to remember that this is a journey. This does not happen overnight. The digital transformation for any organization is a journey, but it's imperative to constantly reinforce the firm's core values. We have our third polling question. What area of change is most critical to you? Is it the people, the process, the technology, or the culture? People, process, technology, culture. A few seconds. All right, Maddie, we ready? Very equitable breakout. 28% said people, 15% said process, 24% technology, and interesting that the highest percentage of 33% was around culture. Okay, I'm going to ask Nita to talk a little bit about the law firm of the future.
Thank you, Bob. So I just want to, as we talk about the law firm of the future, sort of take into account all the things that Bob was actually saying are going to be changing in the legal industry. So the way to think about what the law firm of the future needs to look like is, one is how it actually works with clients, and one is how it operates internally. So it's an outward facing look and an inward facing look. So as you're dealing with clients, there's a need, and we've seen this in a lot of services business, as to how we can actually be much more client-centric. And the way that you need to think about that is, how do you better understand the client's needs? How do you get new clients? And then how do you offer them products and services that would actually go beyond just legal advice, but would be other things that they might be needing, things like managed services, managed legal services, or other products that could help them run their business much more efficiently. And then even as they're looking at how their projects are being done, to help track it more effectively. And what our sort of thinking is that the law firm of the future will probably, there might be a digital platform that the law firms can use to actually track all their projects, but also to get access to information. And then if you start to think about how you operate as a law firm, that's the way to think about that is, and it seems, as you guys have all said, that people and culture is going to be a very critical aspect. So the people, we have to think about what kind of, so would you have full-time lawyers, part-time lawyers, maybe bring in subject matter experts as needed, and then using maybe, like, you know, when there's times when there's going to be a lot of work, then you bring in like fractional resources to come and help out at that point in time. So it's thinking about people in a very different way. Then you look at your processes, optimizing all your processes, streamlining them, you know, automating them, and then figuring out what are the different things that you might think about outsourcing. And then finally, sort of technology, and then bringing all that together, creating like a single place for your legal professionals to go to, like called the legal desktop of the future, which is what we think would be the single place where all your lawyers would go to perform the work. And then everything else would come together. This would all be enabled and supported by the legal services ecosystem. So it's literally thinking about how your law firm operates in a very different fashion, how you work with clients, and then how do you actually operate as a business? Bob, back to you.
Thank you. All right, so how do we achieve this? Well, first of all, it's important to remember that no one size fits all. I mean, every organization, every law firm is different. So what is right for you, determine that. I'm going to jump to number 3. I mentioned earlier, technology is an enabler. Do not assume that technology is a solution. It enables all of these changes that Nita was talking about. But take a holistic approach to optimizing the business operations. And this can be done through a design thinking session to really get your arms around where you are, where you want to be in the future state, and then what are the steps necessary and prioritized to execute against that. And examine the current business model and develop the approach to how you want to get to that future state. And what can you do? The polling question is, what can you do to achieve the desired future state? Subscribe to an online legal publication, conduct a design thinking session, begin by implementing new technology, visit a psychic, or do nothing. This should be relatively apparent. And the results are in. The design thinking session. We had a few that want to visit a psychic to get there. 2% for subscribing to an online legal publication, implement new technology, or do nothing. Well, thank you for those responses. And now I'd like to get to our panel discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share so we can see our panelists. Toby, Joy, Nita, welcome back. During this brief presentation, we talked about the recent shifts in the legal industry, the changing needs of the buyer, the increase in complexity of legal advice, the changing role of the general counsel, competition for junior talent. I'm going to start with you, Toby. Where do you see the biggest impact of such shifts?
Thank you. And I'm happy to be here today with this great crew. And I should clarify one thing. I am the outgoing Chief Practice Management Officer at Perkins Coie. Friday is my last day, and more news on that to come. So I may be speaking somewhat in the past tense. I liked on Nita's slide how she started off with client-centric. To me, and I'll put a little bit different frame around the subject, focusing on, the firm of the future. To me, the holy grail is changing the service delivery model. There's a lot of innovation that firms can do that makes their back office more efficient, and they should absolutely be doing that. But to me, when we're talking about the law firm of the future, we're talking about changing that. And I would argue that you could take a lawyer from the 1990s, and I used to say 1980s, but I guess I'm getting old, and drop them into a law firm today and give them training on a few tools, and it's the same thing. The sort of how law is practiced really hasn't changed. And I think, I should say I know, because I have a lot of conversations with clients, if the needle's going to get moved, that's what has to happen. I mean, yeah, you can push work to lower cost labor sources, which you should, but if you fundamentally don't change the way things are done, then we're going to be stuck in this cycle. So where I see it from, and I mentioned about connecting with clients, I have a lot of direct client conversations, and I've had for a number of years, and that's with I've got all these hats. That's with my pricing hat on, because I talk to them about rates, I talk to them about fees. What those conversations over time evolved into was, in fact, I would have lawyers say, can you give me a list of questions to ask, when you're not there, Toby? And I'm like, no, it's a conversation. And one of my go-to questions is what will make you look good at the end of the year? And the trick with clients, and I tell this to lawyers, is ask a question and then shut up. Listen to what the client says and find out where their pain is. So when I talk to clients, I'm really probing to see where it hurts. And it's not the bet the company litigation, it's not the IPO, it's their run the business, legal work, legal support, and they got business units breathing down their neck. So when I look at how do we face up, how do we address this, that's the pain we need to focus on. So I've been very fortunate in my role, and one of my golden rule phrases, which has enabled me to do a lot of this, is that lawyers will do anything to avoid talking about fees, and both on the client side and on the law firm side. So very early on, in fact, this was 12, 13 years ago, when I first started into legal pricing, I was sent to talk to a major client of the firm I was at with no partners coming with me. And I'm like, I actually am not really sure if I know what I'm doing, because I just started doing this. Are you sure you don't want to come with me? And they're like, oh no, you'll be fine. But that, and I consider it a privilege, and I've always respected it and treat it very well, but that's enabled me to ask questions that lawyers don't ask. It's, and it's also opened doors to, especially, over the past, 4 or 5 years, developing relationships with legal operations on the client side. And that has opened up a whole new world of inquiry into what do you really need? Let's dig down into that. And I'm rambling a bit, but it's what I do. The other thing I would put in there, and my answers on the poll questions, well, other than the psychic one, yeah, I did answer psychic, were about people and talent. If you look at firms, and I think the firms of the future should really start thinking about this now, people still kind of consider like pricing and legal project management as new roles. I don't. The roles I see as new, I'll give 2 examples from Perkins. We have something called the Client Relationship Group that I developed, and it is a practice management type support for key clients. And you might say, oh, that's client account management. No, it's not. It's if there is a billing problem, the legal ops person calls the client relationship group person and says, we've got a billing issue here, can we fix this? It gets fixed without even the lawyers being involved. It takes, the way I look at it is, it takes the friction out of the relationship. That has been very successful, very successful. The clients in that program, revenue is up, I'll say that. Another program we developed is our client innovation program. So once the CRG team identifies some pain, the client innovation team comes in right behind them and says, hey, here's some ideas. And innovation, I know, obviously Joy's here, typically involves technology, and I think it should. But it has to start with what is the problem. And so that client innovation group comes in behind and has a deeper dive, conversation with the client. Okay, I've talked for a while. I shall pause. I don't even know what the question was. Did I answer it, Bob?
And then some. We'll probably come back to some of that. But in terms of recent shifts and the largest impact, Joy, what do you see?
Well, there are many years Toby and I have known each other and worked together, and so we agree on many things. And one thing I'll agree with him on is the practice of law hasn't fundamentally changed since Hammurabi. The only thing that's changed are the tools. But I think that when you look at those, what I call first principles, we want to look at the things that aren't going to change as well as the things that are shifting. So the first thing that isn't going to change is that law is at its root a trust business. It's a relationship business. So everything you do, and this gets to the points about culture, right? Everything has to do with supporting that trust relationship between the outside counsel and the inside counsel. And Toby talked about taking friction out of the relationship. What a great way to improve trust, right? So that sense of that ultimately we need to make sure the lawyers trust each other, that's a thing that should never change. So what are the shifts that we have to account for within that paradigm? I want to talk about talent. Again, I, like Toby, answered the questions about people and talent. I think that's, like he talks to a lot of clients. I talk to a lot of CIOs, hundreds of them every year. And talent wars across the organization, in technology, in legal, in innovation, in data science, in research, has never been as hot as it is now. But a couple of things that are important. Remember, your clients are competing with you for the same talent. One of the things that is happening inside corporate law departments is they're experiencing, at least based on my conversations, unprecedented growth. There's a lot that's happening inside, more lawyers. So you've got junior lawyers coming to law firms, going to corporate law departments. You're competing for that talent. But there's a second area of talent competition that doesn't get discussed as much as it should. And that is competition for lawyers for things other than practicing. Okay? So there are all kinds of roles now that lawyers take on where having a law degree, having legal experience is actually very valuable. And it's in some of these roles. Innovation is a great example. Knowledge management is a great example. So not only are you competing for the best legal talent to staff your law firm and to staff client matters, you've got the need for lawyers in other roles. So this is one of the key shifts I think we need to account for, is that talent wars are law firm to client, and between the practice and delivery of legal services directly and the other things that are complementary. Then I will, because I have to talk about technology, and I was teasing Bob and Nita that we needed to add to that list, along with consult a psychic, join ILTA. That's like one of the best ways you're going to get great information, certainly about legal technology. But I want to talk a little bit about the model rule. So many of you are aware of Comment 8 of the Model Rule of Professional Conduct 1.1, I think it's the exact designation, that over 40 states have adopted now, which requires lawyers as an ethical requirement to possess technology competency. Now, nobody has yet really examined what that means, what technology competence means. Someone will. But what it means is that technology is no longer going to be something you do if you like it, if you're tinkering. It simply is going to be embedded in absolutely everything. And the more we can help lawyers understand that, make technology easy to use. I'm very fond of saying, Toby had his sayings, here's one of mine. Lawyers, it's a myth that lawyers hate technology. Lawyers love technology. What they hate is complexity. So it's developing a set of technologies that are so integrated, that are so ingrained in the day-to-day operation that they're essentially invisible. And that is one of the shifts that needs to happen. And I hope people are thinking about how it happens. And looking forward to the rest of the conversation today. Thank you. Let me say thank you now for having me. It's fun to talk to all of you guys. And I really enjoyed the first part of the presentation too. Thanks.
Thank you for being here. Nita.
So in my mind, I think one of the biggest shifts is this kind of ties a little bit both into what Toby and Joy said. To me, it's the changing role of the general counsel. And I'll give you sort of just some thinking around that and why I say that, because historically, you always start with legal, you bring them in when everything has been done, they'll come in and help out with the contracts, or if you're getting sued, you bring them in. But what's happening is as businesses are starting to adopt technology, they're using it to either go to market or, to make their own business more efficient. What it's starting to do is that now it actually makes sense to bring legal to the table early on. So which means where they were being thought of as reactively, where they proactively are being brought in to offer strategic advice to the CEO. And if you don't do that, then that's a big mistake, because And I had done that in one of my previous roles as we were trying to use some technology. We were like, who brings legal to the table? Until it turned out that you needed to get legal, risk, and regulatory, because as you're using technologies and like AI, everybody says, oh, AI is going to solve the problem. Until you realize that there's legal issues about where data has to sit, where it has to be hosted, that it cannot cross boundaries. And then there's issues about security and privacy. And so what's happening is now the role of the general counsel is getting increasingly complex. So not just giving legal advice, but helping the business understand that if they make certain decisions, if they use certain technologies, what are going to be the implications? So that's why then they need to have, so their range of what they needed to know, what used to be like, you need to know X kind of law. Now they need to understand not just the law, they need to understand the technology and then the legal implications of that on the business. And so that's why I think they are, and in some ways they are driving a lot of this change, because they need to understand that, and then what they're going to look for their law firms, who are their trusted advisors, to give them that advice. And they almost want it to be that, don't wait for me to come to you when I have a problem. Think about proactively what I as a general counsel might need. So as you give that to me, then it'll help me do my business much more effectively. And then I will give you it so that it becomes a more symbiotic relationship. It's the trust. I trust you to give me good advice. So I think that's why the role of the general counsel is becoming increasingly important, and how it's changing.
Let me make a quick comment here, if I may, because again, in my conversations with corporate law department people, I really want to underscore what Nita said. I'll add to that. This is one of the areas where the pandemic really accelerated this change, because so many things had to change so fast. It's like, okay, we're going to send people home. What does that mean? How do we pay them? What are the risks? What if they have an accident? What's the ocean? And then when do they come back? And what's our liability? And do they have to be vaccinated? I mean, there was problem after problem, after one legal problem that was a business problem after another. And what I have heard from now chief legal officers, as we often call them, rather than general counsel, is that more and more other business units bring them into conversations earlier, because that group, the law department, was so critical, especially in that first 6 to 9 months after everyone started to work from home, in making them successful. It created trust.
Picking up on that, a phrase that started popping up 2 years ago, maybe 3, from clients, and a lot of Perkins clients are tech companies. Name that tech company, it's probably a Perkins one. But they started saying, we want you to look around the corner for us, which was their way of saying anticipate. We don't, we would, which is, I would say that is something that's changed. They're saying we want to anticipate. I remember years and years ago, I was running eDiscovery, and we put together an eDiscovery preparation offering for clients. And they're like, yeah, we don't have budget for that. And we're like, if you do this, your discovery costs will go down dramatically. I'm like, yeah, no, we don't have budget for that. So now they're actually asking for it. And what they're saying is we don't want to get caught flat-footed when, X happens in 18 months and we didn't think about it or to make any changes to anticipate it and mitigate risk. So seeing a lot more of that.
And then what you were saying, Toby, right? That almost understanding what their pain point is, some of which they're able to articulate, but a lot of times you find that people will tell you the symptoms. It's the same when you go to a doctor, you're like, this is hurting, I'm not quite sure what's causing it. So I think it's also going beyond, like you just said, they will tell you what they're feeling, and then you have to almost figure out, okay, what's causing it, and then how can we help solve it? So I think that's also becoming very key, because that's what they're looking for you to be the person who's going to help them do that. Just looking around corners, but even problem solving for them.
I hadn't thought about it in that way, but for a while, but the looking around corners, the forward looking stuff, clients, well, I'm losing my thought, which is a Zoom thing, right? I'll step back. I had a thought. It'll probably come back to me. Go ahead, Nita or Joy.
All right. So Joy, I want to come back to you with your interesting background with large law firms and legal technology. How do you see law firms evolving in the next couple of years? What actions should they take to continue to grow? And is it different for a big law firm versus a small law firm?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And certainly, in the technology space, let's start by saying that the single biggest determinant of an organization's tech stack in terms of law firm is size. It's not practice, it's not jurisdiction. It's, am I a big firm or am I a small firm? And that's certainly often true of the back office thing. But what do we see coming? You know, I think that there are a couple of areas of controversy. So let me point those out. First of all, there's one school of thought that says this mega firm, mega firm trend will continue, and that it will completely squeeze out the firms in the middle. I know many of you may be familiar with a great novel called Jailbird, where at one point, basically the entire business community in the whole world is controlled by a company called the Ramjack Corporation. And the CEO is a homeless person who lives under Grand Central Station because it's the only place they feel safe, signing things. That we're going to end up with law firms like that. I personally don't agree with that. I mean, I think that big firms will continue to get bigger, yes, but there will always be a place in the middle, particularly for regional kinds of firms that are working not necessarily with clients that have a broad reach across a nation or internationally. Certainly, we will continue to see lots of boutique firms pop up. But the thing is, the firm has to decide what its identity is. I think that's the critical thing. And for those of you who are advising firms, who are your clients? Who are you trying to serve? Are they multinational or are they regional? Are they looking for a specific kind of expertise? Or are they looking to concentrate a large amount of legal spend with one organization? The second thing that I think is not as controversial, we've talked about it a little bit already, is that you will see lawyers in all kinds of non-traditional roles in the law firm of the future. And that has implications for compensation. It has implications for billing rates. It has implications for what kinds of services you bill for. And I think that you will find there will be a certain fluidity that we have to explore and figure out. So people who have been on a non-practicing track that may then want to move into practice and vice versa, how do we accommodate that? I think the third thing, and this I'm actually stealing from one of our CIOs who's on our advisory group. He calls it the war between the traditionalists and the digitalists. And where this really comes from is hybrid workplace and return to office. I know we're all sick to death of talking about that, but the point is we can't stop talking about it. So I'll take New York, for example. Most large law firms, if not all, kind of put in you're going to be back in the office after Labor Day, at least 3 days a week. That has had mixed success. And as one CIO said to me, you're not going to fire a partner for not coming into the office 3 days a week, right? And so the firms where the digitalists are really the influencers and are the leaders of the firm to say, we don't need to be in the office 3 days a week or 4 days a week or 2 days a week on any regular schedule in order to establish trust and deliver service. And then the traditionalists saying, that's the only way we can establish trust. It's the only way we can train the next generation of lawyers. I'm telling you folks, there is no right or wrong answer to that question. It's all a question of how, right? But culturally, you have to understand who it is that's driving the conversation, which way the organization is going, and what the implications are for talent and technology as well as process.
So after I don't know how many years, I found something I can disagree with Joy. It's nuanced. It's nuanced. And I'm not saying I think there's going to be, the Ramjack law firm, but and I can say this because I've been at 4 AmLaw 50 firms. I've traditionally been at large firms. And my background is economics. I always said there's no economies of scale in legal because if it takes 100 hours to do it, it doesn't matter if it was 100 different lawyers or one. But there is an economies of scale for larger firms in that, well, I'll put it simply, they can afford me or they can't. Scale brings, and I actually did this exercise a few years back and said, okay, a firm I was at versus a firm that was twice the size. and said, if the firm wants to make a $10 million investment in its infrastructure, what I put it down to, what was the pain per partner? And it was double for the smaller of those two mega firms, because you can spread it across more partners, or you can spread it across richer partners. So I do think there is something to that it's a lot harder. Well, and one, Joy, I know this is one you're more up on, is in the information security space. Perkins has very, very top-notch information security because we used to represent the Democratic National Committee. And for some reason, that brought everybody to our door to try to attack our networks. That's not cheap. That's not cheap. So what I want to do is give kind of a specific example, and it goes to your non-practicing lawyer. The person who runs our client innovation is a lawyer, but obviously not practicing. And it would always shock me how many people on my team were lawyers in that space. But what I want to get to is back to the point about the new roles in law firms, or the law firm of the future. So this is one I can talk about publicly. The Perkins Coie won the ACC Value Champion Award last year doing this. And this also highlights thank you, Joy, highlights how the client relationship group, and then followed by client innovation, can really solve a client's problem. So the client involved, again, it's public, was 7-Eleven. And what had happened was, I was having conversations with an AGC at 7-Eleven named Kristen Cook, delightful woman. And the pain they were having was in contract review. And they were sending some here and some there. And Perkins was doing their tech contracts. And I said, well, help me understand, that's one of my favorite phrases, what that pain is. And she goes, well, frankly, we don't know how many contracts we do. We don't know what kind of contracts. We're always being yelled at by the business units because, we're the department of no and slow. And so I said, well, would you be willing to explore maybe some change in the service delivery model? And she said, absolutely. So bring in, actually in this instance, both the client innovation team and the legal project management team. So we'll pause for a moment. I have now 3 people plus me having direct conversations with a client, and it's not about a legal matter. Those are unique roles. And I think they're important and will grow in importance to clients because they actually add a ton of value, which we'll talk about in a moment, to the engagement. So I think clients should start thinking it's more than just the lawyers that are part of this engagement. So what we did, we ran analytics and determined that on average, when a contract was sent to Perkins, because we had that data, on average, there were 12 emails back and forth before all the information we had all the information we needed to do substantive legal analysis. So what we did, simple, we said, well, instead of the 12 emails, we're going to set up a little portal. So we see that we always ask these 8, 10 questions, whatever it was. So what we're going to have you do is answer the questions, attach the document, and hit go. Now that had some controversy in the legal department. Just that level of change had controversy in the legal department. There were a couple of lawyers there who I'll put in the traditional camp that you had, Joy, who said, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. Ultimately, they became 2 of the strongest proponents of this, because they realized it accelerated it. I'll start with one of the punchlines, again, public. This reduced the cost per matter by 18%. Just changing the way the work was sourced reduced the cost per matter by 18%. That is huge. And the general counsel takes that to the board and says, here's what we're doing to be good fiduciaries of the legal spend of this company. The other thing she was extremely happy about was, and this goes to Nita, you were saying their roles changing. She said it was the first time I got in front of the board where I had fancy graphs to present. And what it was we helped her demonstrate that they weren't the department of slow and no, and that it was actually the business units, because we now had data. When we did the emails, we didn't have data. But now we have data and we can say, okay, here's all the types of contracts. here's how long they take. Here, we could go through the phase and said, here's how long it was in your legal department. Here's how long it was with the firm. And then it sat on some business leader's desk for 2 weeks before they signed it or signed off on it or whatever. She loved that. She goes, that was the first time. She goes, since then, none of the business units point at the legal department and goes, you guys are taking too long to get the contracts done. So I like to tell that story, not only was with legal project management, client innovation, what we learned was, and the tech we used was exceedingly simple. It's a simple portal. This is not, blockchain smart contracts, simple portal. What we're learning from that is that roles we hadn't anticipated. Who supports the portal? If the client has an issue with the portal, who do they call? Well, for now, or in the short run, they call my legal project management point person for that client, because that's who they know. And in fact, that person goes on site on a regular basis with 7-Eleven. Well, they were doing it a lot before the pandemic, but they have a very good relationship with the 7-Eleven legal team. So those are roles firms are going to like, what do we do? And it's not like a software support role necessarily. We've got to train the client or have training for the client on how to do this. I mean, most firms do have training, but this is a little unique kind of training. So I see law firm of the future, we've got to start thinking about different ways of doing things, and with all these new roles that no one even knows exist yet. Okay, I talked for a while.
Can I add to something, Joy, what you were saying about the big firm versus small firm? So what's happening is the big firms have been doing incredibly well, and they'll do enough to sort of be innovative. But you tend to find that, and we've always seen this when it comes to things like people who really need to change, it's when they have that burning platform for change. And more often than not, it's the middle firms, like the next tier, not the big guys, the next tier that's getting squeezed because now the general counsel or the legal officer, the chief legal officer is saying, hey, can you reduce your costs, et cetera. So because of the fact that they're facing more pressure, they are willing to think outside the box. And what technology has done is where you needed to have fancy offices, you needed, a lot of infrastructure. Technology is actually helping you to leapfrog some of those things. So you're able to almost like punch above your weight. So if you've got experts in a few areas, and you don't have to have all the lawyers full-time if you've been able to form strategic alliances. So Joy, you're working at ILTA, I'm working here, we work together, but together we go to the client. So what I'm saying is that a lot of the change, the mid-tier firms will probably be doing it more not because they want to, but because they have to. They don't have the money, like Toby, like you were saying, to be able to afford a lot of the things. So then they'll think outside the box. How can we do this, but in a much, easier, cheaper way? And I think that's where the change is going to come. And that's where we've been seeing it. And this is also, we see that in a lot of other industries as well, because they have to, not because they necessarily want to. But we good to get both your reactions on this.
Go ahead, Joy.
Well, I can certainly say that on the mid-sized firm thing is they have a culture of making hard choices. That's what that middle level firm does. I mean, and I, like Toby, spent my career in actually a global 10 firm, right? That's for 28 years. If they had 6 tools to do the same thing, it's like, okay, it's not optimal, but it's fine. A mid-sized firm isn't going to afford 6 tools. They don't have the resources to do it. So they're going to make hard choices, and they're going to squeeze every bit of functionality out of that tool. They're going to take more risks. Certainly moving to cloud is a great example of that. I mean, the mid-sized firms were years ahead of the big firms in terms of moving to cloud. Not all big firms, of course, but I mean, generally speaking. They were also very much ahead of the game in terms of outsourcing. And I think this is another piece of the talent conversation we should have, because, I was thinking about, Toby said they can afford me. I can remember the chairman of my old firm once called the firm, not chairman, he's retired now, but called it an unapologetic meritocracy. I thought that was fabulous, right? And that it was the best legal professionals, but also the best marketing professionals, the best IT professionals, the best finance professionals. Well, that's expensive. And sometimes you have to decide which of those specialists you need to have in-house and which you can outsource. and especially in the security space. And I was really happy Toby brought that up too, because that's a problem that we all have equally. Mid-sized firms were very early to the game, and small firms, in doing fractional CISO type of functionalities, outsourcing security, because they couldn't afford the level of talent it would take to deliver what they needed. Because remember, mid-sized firms need to deliver largely the same services as mega firms. They just don't have as much money to do it and as much people. So thinking about that outsourcing conversation, and when you're talking with your law firm clients, where is their head on outsourcing? What are they willing to outsource? What are the implications of it, especially for security? It's a really critical conversation to have. The law firm of the future is going to have a much different mix of insourced and outsourced resources than the firm of today, I think.
So now, since I like to argue both sides, I'm going to switch sides. The other advantage, I think, I'll say mid-sized firms, whatever we want to call them, is the ability to make the decision. The larger the firm, like another thing I've been running at Perkins Coie is the lateral partner acquisition team. In the process, we've had to develop, so we check every box to make sure, well, for this kind of candidate, these 6 people need to know, these 10 people we need to inform. It's like you have to get everyone's opinion to make a decision. Whereas the smaller sized firms, they have fewer partners, but I generally have seen that their leadership is, we're making this decision and we're making it now, to your point, out of necessity, Joy.
And thank you. So before I ask for parting shots, Joy, you mentioned a word earlier that is really embedded in a lot of organizations' culture, and that's the word trust. What do you view as the largest impediment to engendering trust?
Oh, communication and transparency. I always say with my own team, I only have 2 rules. 2 things you do, and you're going to have any trouble with me. 1, if there's bad news, I want to hear it from you first, and never let me get taken by surprise by something good or bad, right? And I'm not going to yell, I'm not going to scream, I'm never going to get upset. I just want to know so I can know what we have to do next. Trust comes from transparency. And that also means, like, again, I live in the technology world. Don't tell the lawyer that the application is going to stand on its head and whistle Dixie if it won't, because they're smart. They'll figure it out, right, eventually. So say it'll do 80% of the things you asked for, and it won't do these 20. Okay, thank you, right? At least I know. And this is all kinds of ways. It means that the law firms need to have hard conversations that Toby was talking about in a very transparent way with clients about things that are uncomfortable to talk about, which are usually fees and bills and those kinds of issues. It means that internally, lawyers and IT people and innovation people have to listen to each other, and then they have to agree on what success looks like. And if they can communicate in that way, decide on what outcome is what everybody wants, because lawyers are outcome focused, right? That's what they live and die by, is what outcome am I getting for my client. If you can do that and focus on outcome, be transparent, the trust issues happen naturally. And that's just a voice of experience over a lot of years working with lawyers.
Thank you. Toby, do you want to argue with that?
Let's see. Well, this might be disagreeing slightly with Joy, something she said earlier. To me, the biggest impediment, and I'm kind of in a window where I can be a little more direct, is the lawyers. Like I gave the 7-Eleven story, and that change was nominal. And there were literally 2 lawyers that basically said, this is going to fail, and I'm going to be standing here, with the knife against your back, waiting for it to fail. The changes in the service delivery model, this is my least favorite phrase, Toby, you don't understand. That's lawyers telling me the way they do it is the right way to do it, and they must keep doing it that way. But, and this was a phrase I coined years ago, it's what I call it the paradigm of precedence. That is what has been drilled into their heads since they started law school. And so they don't look forward for solutions, they look backwards to make sure they're, following precedents and following the right way to manage a matter. So to me, that is a big impediment, and it's on both sides, both within client legal departments and within law firms. I talk to legal operations people all the time, and one of my questions is sort of way I have a little fun with them. As I say, in fact, I'll wrap something around it. I've told this to clients. I don't know that I want to be on your panel, because clients have these big panel processes, and the ops people say, why? And I said, because your lawyers are still going to give the work to my firm. I say, when it push comes to shove, are you going to tell a frontline lawyer they're picking the wrong firm? And they're all like, no. So they share my pain. So the lawyer, their frontline, legal department lawyers, like, no, this is the way you do it, and don't tell me otherwise. So that to me is the biggest challenge, the biggest impediment, but the biggest opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to give you each 1 minute for a parting shot. Nita, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. So what I wanted to say was, and this is just because I've seen other services businesses. So what I think is what lawyers need to sort of, or what law firms need to be sort of thinking about is, and what they can learn from other knowledge businesses is, focus on the core value that you bring to your clients, which is providing legal advice and being their trusted advisor. Everything else in some ways is non-essential. If you get that part correct, that's what really matters. And then everything else, like how you actually, figure out everything else, automate your processes, outsource them, do whatever it takes. Just focus on providing that core value and then thinking how you can serve your clients more effectively. As you do that, everything else will kind of fall into place, like how you operate as a business. And then, yes, you give them tools and technologies that they might need, like we said, the desktop of the future, et cetera, which gives them all the tools they need to sort of do all the mundane, repetitive tasks so they can focus on the higher value added activities. To me, I think that should be the way they should think about. This is something that's worked well in a lot of the other sort of knowledge businesses. And that's what law firms really could be thinking about to sort of continue to be successful.
Thank you. Joy, what do you want us to walk away with? Final shot.
Is really spend time when you're working with your law firm clients on getting a definition of success. Again, it gets down to outcomes, a definition of success they can stand by, and something beyond we want to get bigger, right? Is we want to get realization higher. Okay. But let's talk about, what does the partner of the future look like? What kind of person do you want in that role that's handling client relationships, and how do we get them there? Because again, at the end of the day, it's a trust business, it's a relationship business, so you've got to focus on people.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joy. And Toby, bring us home.
Sure. Here's a very good piece of advice. If you're going to take notes, get out your pen. Whoa, that's dated, isn't it, Joy? That if you're going to do innovation, thank you, Joy. If you're going to do innovation, tie it to revenue. I see a lot of innovation occurring in the market where, and in fact, Perkins did one project like this, and they're like, this is great. Clients are going to love this. You've done we don't have, in fact, here's another role I think law firms should have, is product marketing. We don't go test ideas about offerings with our clients like other corporations do. So what all of the innovation I've done, and I can talk about 7-Eleven, it was tied to an existing revenue stream. It wasn't a theoretical revenue stream. And so this makes pushing change a lot easier, because I'll pick up another thing you said, Joy, it's profitability. It's not just revenue, it's profitability. And so if you're tying it to profitable revenue, your chances of success skyrocket. I've seen so many firms build so many things where it was like, well, we thought this was going to work, but clients really didn't uptake on it. So get as close to revenue as you can when you're innovating. So that's my parting shot.
Thank you. Nita, Joy, Toby, thank you very much for participating in this panel today. I think very insightful. And Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. I appreciate it. I agree completely. Thank you all. I enjoyed that discussion. If you have any questions regarding the remainder of today's topic, please reach out to us at any time. You see our contact information on the screen there. We value your feedback and we ask you to take part in a short survey, which will appear just as you leave this session. And a reminder, please continue to check the registration site for remaining sessions and recordings of the sessions that we've previously held. The next one will be Tuesday, December 6th at noon Eastern, and will be on third-party risk management. Thanks, everyone.